I am sorry. Those were the parting words of Rishi Sunak as he prepares to exit 10 Downing Street as the Prime Minister of the UK. A surprisingly dignified response from a leader to mark the end of a long and chaotic Tory rule in the UK. More so because it was Rishi Sunak who led the Tories to the worst electoral defeat in his party's 346-year history. So how exactly did Sunak manage to let it all fall apart for the Conservatives? Has he destroyed the Conservatives? I ask that question because the British voters decided to dump the Conservative Party. While Labour secured 412 of the 650 parliamentary seats, the Conservatives were reduced to 121. Sure, Sunak saved his seat. Many of his cabinet ministers could not. The scale of the defeat made it inevitable that Sunak, the Conservative Party's fifth leader since 2010, would have to step down as the Tory head as well. But the results have not come as a complete surprise. Several polls predicted a rout for the Conservatives after the 14-year rule. It has put a major question mark on the future of the 300-year-old party. But is Sunak responsible for the party's worst ever electoral performance? Well, the answer depends on who you ask, but the one point of consensus is that Sunak's decision to call for an early election proved to be fatal, both for him and for the party. It was his single catastrophic miscalculation. It sent the Tories into a death spiral. Had Sunak pushed the election to a later date, he could have taken the fight to the Labour Party. You see, foreign investment was flowing into the UK. The dark clouds of inflation were clearing in the UK, at least for that point. Sunak could have gone into an election with the UK on an economic high, perhaps. It would have given him enough time, maybe, and properly prepare for the elections. But instead, he chose to pursue the controversial Rwanda scheme. He even staked his reputation on it. There was also goodwill behind him when he took office. Remember, he stepped in after the chaos of Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. Yet, arrogance proved to be his Achilles heel. He saw his opponent as an inferior mind, a poor debater, and therefore beatable. But it was he who destroyed the Tories by proving to be a weak leader. The Tory party remains deeply divided. The outgoing cabinet member, Penny Mordaunt, saying, in fact, that after she lost her seat, that the Conservative Party has taken a battering because it failed to honour the trust the people placed in it. The ousted Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said that voters have been dismayed by the Tories' inability to iron out the differences in private. And they are not wrong. The party has been hopelessly divided over the last few years. Its moderate and extremist wings have been clashing for influence, and this has created political instability in the country. The UK, remember, witnessed 4 prime ministers in just the last 8 years. The endless political soap opera of Tory politics was getting a bit too much to bear in a way. If that wasn't enough, perhaps the lowest point of Sunak's premiership came just a week after he called the vote. Sunak decided to skip commemorations for the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings in France. He left the event early to return home for a television interview. For a lot of patriotic voters, Sunak stripped himself of any dignity that day. By deciding to abandon his emotional high point of 20th century history, it provoked outrage from Second World War veterans as well, as they accused him of letting his country down. It forced Sunak into an abject apology. As gaffes go, this proved to be the most hellish imaginable. There was no way back with the voters. And then, close to the day of the voting, media reports emerged that people close to Sunak, including his parliamentary aides, senior members of his campaign team, and a police officer who served as one of his security guards, were placing bets on the date of the election before the Prime Minister had announced it. They seem to have used inside information that they had gleaned from him in order to make a profit. There have, of course, been a series of other Conservative scandals, most memorably the so-called Partygate. The drunken Downing Street parties that broke COVID-19 lockdown rules, remember, when Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister. And then, of course, there are the other issues in terms of the economy. The country experienced low growth. The UK is performing a lot worse than other major developed economies. In the year 2023, Britain's economy grew by just 0.1%. It also slumped into a recession early this year, and that is a big problem. You see, Sunak pitched himself as an experienced administrator. He portrayed himself as a man with a clear plan to fix the country. But he failed to pull the party out of the hole it dug itself into. And then there is the cost of living crisis, of course. Inflation has only just come down after reaching 40-year highs in October 2022. It has made the British people poor and angry. Meanwhile, Sunak only got richer. By some estimates, Sunak and his wife Akshata Murthy are worth £651 million. You know what that means? It means the British Prime Minister is richer than the King of England. He was seen as out of touch with the ordinary citizens and their issues. Unlikable, unable to make decisive moves. Tactically, Sunak came up short. The tax-cutting line he settled on in the final days of the campaign came a little too late. In the later stages of the campaign, as everything seemed to turn against Rishi Sunak, he visited a farm in Devon for a photo opportunity. He tried to feed a sheep there, but the flock ran away from the Prime Minister. His photo op failed. The video of the incident viral, inviting laughter and memes from netizens. Unfortunately for Sunak, it looked like the perfect allegory for his campaign. As now, it's not just the sheep, even the voters seem to have run away from Sunak and the Conservative Party. And what's brewing on the ground? What has the day been like? Let's go straight across to our correspondent now, who's been tracking all those updates. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast, Oliver. Let me begin by asking you to sum up for us what the key takeaway from both the sides has really been like, given that this has been a historic mandate.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a historic day here in London, in the UK. A change of government, the Labour Party coming to power for the first time since 2010, and the Conservatives out of power after 14 years of quite controversial rule, as you've just mentioned in quite a lot of detail there. But the Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer reinvented over the past 5 years since he took charge, and are celebrating a fantastic victory, a huge mandate from the British people, albeit with not a huge voter turnout and also not a huge percentage of the vote, but a tactical, very organised campaign has seen them pick up a ream of seats they've never won before and utterly now dominates the House of Commons that we can see behind me. We've just had Sir Keir Starmer naming his cabinet in the past hour. All the big names have been walking up that famous street into number 10 Downing Street. He's named Angela Rayner as his deputy, the likes of David Lammy as his foreign secretary and Yvette Cooper as the home secretary. It seems he's remaining very loyal to those who have been in his shadow cabinet when he's now naming his first government cabinet. And it actually goes to show just what a day in democracy looks like, because we've seen all those former ministers losing their seats overnight. The Conservatives in absolute disarray. The transfer of power seamlessly passes from one party to the next. And you mentioned the Conservatives. Well, yeah, a sobering day for them, a very difficult one. Rishi Sunak admitting that he takes responsibility for the results, and they will have a lot of soul searching to do over the coming weeks and months.
Right, Oliver, for someone who's been following the UK developments, even from a distance, to them as well, this would not come as a complete surprise, given how the last few months have panned out for Rishi Sunak, to the extent that the move to call for these elections was also called self-destructive. But let's just talk about what happens from here onwards. How will Keir Starmer do things differently is the question. He's called it a reset already, but what really lies ahead?
Well, it is a difficult job, and he's made no bones about it. When he was talking outside number 10 Downing Street, he was admitting that it's going to be a tough job. He's going to try and turn the that's methodical, that's very much in his character. He's, of course, He's got a background in the legal profession. He's a very competent individual, and he's slowly going to try and get the economy working better for the people of the UK. He's determined to build more houses for the young people here, and he wants to turn the government into something that he believes serves the British people. So often over the past 14 years we've been obsessed with scandal and sleaze of this Tory party, particularly in the last few years, as you mentioned, under Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss. Rishi Sunak, to his credit, did bring an amount of competence back to the Conservatives, but by then I think the electorate were tired. We have never seen 5 consecutive elections won by the same party, so it was a time for change. Sir Keir Starmer has been using that word, change, throughout his campaign, and now it really is the long, hard walk to try and activate some of those ideas that he's got. So it's, at the moment, Labour haven't really said too much about what they're going to do. They've just said they're going to approach things in a more competent, more serious fashion. And of course, once they've got their feet under the table, they'll have to look at the public finances, have a look at how much money is available, and then make some big decisions on how they're going to try and arrest what has been a very difficult decade for many here in the UK.
And a difficult time for the economy as well. We're leaving it there for the moment. Oliver, thanks very much for joining us with all those updates. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.